So certainly, last but certainly not least, we've now got Antoine. We're very much looking forward to your paper, Antoine.
Merci, Chris. Hello to everybody. I should apologize for the length of my paper, and but it's the fact is I've got somehow fascinated recently in that notion of independence as one of the most, I think, central and contentious concept of contemporary politics. A notion through which in our contemporary democracies, a lot of institutions claim discretionary powers and claim sovereignty in some situation, a concept which in a way has become cross-sectoral, not only as we used to have it as a judicial independence, but as you know, for regulators, for central bankers, and a large series of arbitrators and other forms and figures of mediation. So I think it's a cross-sectoral political technology of our current democracies. And at the same time, I think we continue to look at this notion in a very segmented way. We talk about courts and judicial independence, central banks and judicial independence, regulators, and I think there is something which is more cross-sectoral about this this notion, and also a notion that has been continuously reinvented over the past 2 or 3 decades. And I think for this, it's particularly interesting to have it as an entry point. Of course, it's hard to avoid today its centrality in the EU politics. As we've been discussing yesterday, over the past decade, the notion of judicial independence has been a core point of contention between the Hungarian, the Polish government, and EU institutions, the CJEU, the Commission, and the rule of law controversy in general. Of course, at the same time, over the past decade, the issue has been equally controversial around the European Central Bank, as its power have expanded during the crisis. And again here, in the whole judicial saga between the Bundesbank, the German Constitutional Court, the European Court of Justice, again, the notion of independence has become very much the core of a controversy. So in a way, it's at the core of a lot of ongoing jurisdictional battles between the EU and the member states, between the EU and the national level. And in a way, the question is, why is it that these conflicts, or so many conflicts over the EU, its scope, its definition, transform into conflicts over the notion of independence, conflicts over the definition, the scope, the meaning of the notion. So, of course, for a large part, the reason for this is the rise of populist constitutionalism, which of course puts a great stress on independent institutions. But my point is also that part of the reason for which these conflicts continually transformed into conflicts over the notion of independence relates to something specifically EU, something relate to the deep entanglement between the European project and the promotion of independent institutions. So basically, the point of my paper is to exemplify the fact that the EU has been a laboratory ever since the 1950s of a reinvention of the notion of independence. The EU has been the laboratory of particularly theory of independence, which I could somehow define along 2 particular elements. First element is a move away from a definition of independence as a negative technique, independence from political pressure, towards a larger understanding of independence for independence as an empowering technique, as something that becomes a technique of government in the name of general interest, in the name of long-term interest of the European project, for example. So that's one first move, I think, that is specifically EU or European in the definition of independence, or in which the EU has played a critical role in redefining it. The second element, I think, of the EU laboratory of independence, I think, is the cross-sectoral understanding of independence. Independence not only as specific to the world of courts, the world of central banks, but as a concept that is a common cognitive platform for a variety of institutions, be they central banks, courts, regulators, connecting independence to expertise and to a notion of general interest. So basically what the paper does or tries to do, it's a draft, actually it's my first presentation of this paper, so I'm looking forward to questions and criticisms. What the paper that tries to do is to identify the long career of this notion of independence as it enters the field of EU politics, if you want, the competing definitions, battles at the periphery of the European Court of Justice, of the European Central Bank, and of the European Commission, which are somehow the triptych of EU independence. So I follow what I call Europe's independence wars in the sense that there are debates and conflicts over the definition of independence. I have three critical junctures. I will go very briefly. The first one is the founding years. The second one is the challenge of the arrival of a new independent, the European Central Bank. And the third one is the fight, the battle over national independence, which is the current situation with the rule of law controversy. So the first moment, critical juncture, what I try to show how initially in the late 50s, somehow the EU, the European communities, inherited from the traditional understanding of independence that was developed in the League of Nations. Independence was something for international civil servants, for international judges, to be protected from their own national governments, from the pressures, political pressures. And so it was a negative understanding of independence as a protection, independence from, and it was an understanding of independence that was individual. The individual civil servant had to be protected from its government. Progressively in the 1960s, around the court, the commission, and the Euro lawyers have been working on for many years, as a sort of constitutional understanding of the treaties emerges, there is a new understanding of independence that is crafted. It's not only negative, but it's also positive. It's independents are the best suited institutions to produce an understanding of Europe's general interest. They have an objective role of defending Europe's constitution. The Commission, the Court have an objective role of pursuing Europe's general interest through law and through the defense of the European Constitution. So it becomes an empowering technique, and empowering in the sense that it gives discretionary powers to the Court and to the Commission, and a number of cases in the case law go in that direction. So it's a positive, and it's not only the individuals who are now somehow empowered, but also the institution. So it's the Commission that acts in the name of the general interest, not just the commissioner and the individual judge at the court. So that's the first discursive formation, if you want, of the 50s, 60s period. Then I go on with the challenge of the European Central Bank. I think it's a very interesting moment because, of course, the ECB comes with a completely different understanding of independence. Independence is understood in monetary terms. It's understood in economic theory. And when it turns into a legal claim, in the early cases on Olaf, as you know, the Court of Justice, the legal service of the European Central Bank translates that into a claim that the ECB is somehow independent, not only from politics, but also from the European communities. It's a specialized European community. So it's completely outside of accountability mechanisms from the common institutional framework. So here we see in the, the long legal saga over, OMT and between the German Constitutional Court and the Court of Justice, we see, that conflict progressively, the progressive co-optation of the European Central Bank, the progressive reframing of the notion of independence, as the ECB is forced somehow during the crisis to recognize that, the centrality of the Court of Justice, forced to recognize the notion that there's a union of law, and that it's accountable somehow to that system, while at the same time, the Court of Justice is somehow forced to recognize that the ECB has broad discretionary powers, that its expertise is unaccountable in a way, etc. So what I see here in that phase, it's sort of a mirror exercise, a sort of a mutually recognizing exercise where independents mutually recognize each other in a sort of rapport de force, with the result that in the end there is a broader understanding of and a broader definition of Europe around this independent branch, not only the independence of the courts and also the Commission, but also now a broader cross-sectoral understanding where the bank, the court, and the Commission somehow share the idea that independent institutions are expert-based, that they are pan-European, and that somehow they follow the long-term general interest of the European project. So do I have 1 minute, or 1 minute and I'm a little bit long, sorry. So the last challenge, and maybe I can come back in the Q&A. The last moment is the more contemporary one with the populist challenge, if you want, when these new governments claim somehow, claim that, to reform national independence, courts, regulators, and central banks. And of course, it clashes with European independence, which have a claim that their counterparts, national central banks for the ECB, national constitutional courts for the ECJ, and of course, regulators for the European Commission, are not just any national independence, but they are also under their jurisdiction. So here I follow also a new moment of a redefinition of independence, where the triptych, the ECB, ECJ, and the Commission, and I go into a lot of detail here, start debating or defining a systemic understanding of independence. Independence is just not the independence of the court, but it's also interlocked with the independence of national central banks, of national regulators, and progressively what we see here is these three institutions defining a sense of commonality across EU independence, and again defining this broad cognitive platform for Europe's independent branch. So I'm done. The idea again is to see that we recognize this historically rooted centrality of independence in how the EU claim sovereignty, legitimacy and sovereignty, and that we see how the EU has been a laboratory along the years in this story.